Hi, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Welcome you all to this panel that we have around building resilient brands in India, given the festive season that's right around us. I have a very interesting set of panelists with me, and we're here to discuss how to really decode the festive growth story that we've all been seeing. Right? I think we're really in for a great session of insights, and I'm sure we'll get to hear many interesting things which all of you get to learn from. Firstly, starting off with a quick set of introductions. I'm Navin Madhavan, VP and GM of Growth Platforms at InMobi. I help app developers and marketers get outcomes through a performance marketing platform at InMobi. I've been here for more than 7 years and very happy to have seen the boom of Indian app economy over this last period. And I'm sure we're still at the start of something that's really crazy and going to take over the world. I'll invite my fellow panelists to introduce themselves. Ankit.
Thanks, Naveen. Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Ankit. I'm the Senior Director of Business for Branch in India. I work with some of the top brands in the region in helping them build seamless cross-platform user experiences and measurement. As Naveen said, been a part of this upswing of the Indian app ecosystem over the past 6 years, and I've seen the phenomenal growth. I feel that there's still a lot more ground ahead of us with some of new brands coming in, a lot of innovation coming in the market. So really excited, about learning about some of the experiences from the fellow panelists here and sharing whatever insights I can. Thanks for having me, Naveen.
Thanks, Ankit. Advit, over to you.
Hi guys, Advit over here. I'm VP Marketing at Coindcx. I have been in marketing for the last 12 years, and essentially I started marketing by just by chance. Initially, before that, I used to work for IT, and then I started my own marketing agency. One of the first marketing agencies to start on Facebook marketing way back in early 2010, late 2009. After that, once that agency got acquired, I was heading marketing for an e-commerce brand called Infinity, where essentially we were the first e-commerce brand to go IPO. And now I'm here. Very fond of working with new industries, new categories, and crypto is a very new category. So that's what I'm doing over here.
Ishan, if you just want to give a brief introduction about yourself.
Sure. Thank you, Naveen. So hello, everyone. This is Ishan Bose. I'm leading the marketing, sales, and PR for Creditbee, which happens to be India's largest fintech lending platform for professionals. And looking forward to the discussion.
Thanks, Ishan. Glad to have you here. Definitely an exciting vertical and a brand as well. I'm sure there are many more insights that we can learn from. Let's get started. We have an interesting panel and a very fascinating topic. I think we all know that digital and mobile is definitely capturing everyone's attention, and everyone out here has been trying to figure out what to do the most, especially in a season around the festivals and the festive season of India, where people are consuming and spending a lot through their smartphones today. Right? Just to sort of set some context, we do this every year at InMobi. We try and get a pulse of what smartphone users in India are thinking about, how they're actually planning their festive season spending or their festive season indulgence, and what is it that they're really looking forward to doing in the next few months. We all are very familiar with the number of sales that come up, the kind of discounts, the amazing products that we really get to see, but it's also a time to spend with family, maybe travel with the world was normal, and so on. So we definitely we do this every year. So this year too, we did a small survey and a study, a lot of it which will be published along with this event. So some of the interesting stats that stood out for us, just to sort of kick things off before I hand it over to the panelists, right? We saw that, as is obvious, 72% of the people who responded to us said that they intend to shop this festive season. I do think that we are very aggressive as Indians when we think that we can resist our urges. So this number of 72% is still under, and I'm sure the number is much higher. All of us will end up making that impulse purchase when we see the product on sale, when we see something interesting that we want to pick up and experience a new thing for ourselves and this family and our family every year. Right. I think the other interesting thing that stood out for us is that 36% of the people who actually spoke to us are first-time shoppers, and they're from tier 2 and tier 3 towns. So this just shows how we are actually going to see people consuming and spending time this year, and we've seen this number consistently go up. And I think the representation from tier 2 and tier 3 towns is also something that we've seen increase as well. So with that context set, I'm very curious to hear from our panelists as we go through this to see that this festive season and definitely the last one have not been, the norm, where we're all prepared for celebration, where we all have templates with huge marketing budgets to go after. And that's just not the only thing in our mind. There's a lot going on in the world, and we're all trying to be sensitive to what's going on, right? So maybe just to start things off, I'll ask you to chime in on this, Advit. You've seen many years as we spoke. Last year was really unprecedented. The first time that we saw all of us trying to balance a pandemic that's of concern to everyone, and at the same time getting some time with family and spending it with spending it with our loved ones. So, as an advertiser, this year you possibly have a few learnings from last year through which your assumptions could have been corrected, some campaigns that actually told you a few things, right? So what have been your insights in terms of how consumption and overall user patterns have changed last year, and what have you actually taken back this year to the drawing board when you started planning out for your festive season spends?
Great. So I'll just answer it a little bit differently, because ours is a category which is yet to be established completely, right? When you look at crypto, it is a very new category. It is a very upcoming category. It is a category where a lot of people want to invest. A lot of people are scared also, but people are essentially interested to at least find out what's going on, right? So at this point, it is not really linked to just the festive season. It is linked to a lot of other market factors. For example, if there's a bull run, if Bitcoin immediately goes up, or if there's a bear run, if everything falls down, some people think that it's the best time to invest when it's all going down. Others people think the opposite. Then it's going so high, so we'll invest more. Now, what is also happening is there are thousands of crypto coins, currencies that are coming in. The last I counted was more than 8,000, and that was probably a couple of months back, right? So there's a huge influx in terms of the coins, in terms of exchanges, in terms of brokers, in terms of people wanted to put in their money. Not huge amount of money, but everyone wants to test the waters. So with Festive, what happens really is that the entire system, the entire country is planning to invest. They're planning to. It's a culture, right? I mean, if we talk about culture, what really happens? What is a culture? Right? If you really see the basics of it, firstly, somebody does a transaction. It can be any transaction. After a few times that is done, it becomes a habit, right? If it is done even more, it becomes a behavior. And if it is done even more by a large set of people, it becomes a culture. Right? So right now we are at the first stage where we eventually want to make it a culture. Today, for example, buying gold or buying jewelry is a culture during the festive season. Right. So those parts are already established. We are establishing ourselves. Having said that, the pace is unprecedented. We are going at a pace which is faster than any of the industries, purely because of the growth of the crypto industry, the demand, and it also helps that it's purely a digital product. There's nothing physical involved over here, right? So that's how it is, right? Festive helps. It definitely helps. It will definitely see a large upsurge in terms of our volumes. But irrespective of that, even if there's no festive, we're still seeing that growth anyhow.
Yes, Advit, definitely. I mean, you especially, and to every other new brand and category out there trying to establish themselves, I think what you called out is important. That don't get caught up in all of the surrounding noise. Make sure that you know what's happening with your category, you know what is relevant for you, and push that to users accordingly, right? Definitely looking forward to days when, so possibly starting with this year, when along with Dhanteras, people buying gold, crypto also becomes like, many people start buying crypto first time and become first time investors in the crypto ecosystem. So Ishan, the last year was something where we were learning through how brands live through a pandemic for the first time. This year, it's definitely in a smaller scale, but possibly there are some learnings that you've picked up from there and hence implementing it in a certain fashion this year. So how have you, what were the key observations and insights that you've picked up during the marketing activities that you picked up last year? And what has that resulted in changes and tactics for you specifically with respect to your festive plans this year?
Right. So very interesting domain, I would say, Naveen, because when you talk about festivities in general in India, I mean, especially during the later half or the later quarter of a calendar year, which involves your Dashera and then your Diwali and finally the Christmas and New Year. So that's the time period when people shop a lot for religious reasons, for personal reasons, and they are on that shopping spree, they're on that buying spree, they're on that spending spree, for that matter. So now what happens as a brand for us is to ensure that we tap into that in the best possible manner, because from an advertiser's side, what you see is that the cost of impressions go high, the cost of acquisition goes high, because everyone's putting marketing dollars to acquire those customers, because even from a business standpoint, you want to do a lot of business during this time, right? So that's happening across the industry. And what specifically happened last year during COVID was that it came across as a fresh lease of life, because the lockdown norms were just getting eased out and people were just coming out of the new normal and trying to get used to what is happening around. So with that, it was not as quintessential to give them those offers or those discount campaigns and all that. I mean, that's the experience that we had, that as long as you were educating the customers properly, you're giving them a good customer experience during those difficult times, you're planning to retain your customers who already belong or who are already transacting on your platform. The role of offers or discounts, I felt, was not as important last time, because people were anyways willing to spend and explore. This year again, I think it's going to be slightly more seamless compared to the last year, because again, from a festive standpoint, people are looking forward, and people. I mean, now the vaccinations have also increased, so I think people are looking forward to do a lot of buying, a lot of travel, a lot of spends for that matter. So definitely, the role of discounts, offers, I believe, would play a bigger or would have a bigger impact this time around, as it used to be pre-COVID compared to last year. And I think that's what I would say is the major difference between last year, this year, and probably the times before COVID.
Awesome. Fascinating, Ishan. I think definitely from a vertical point of view, I'm sure Kreditbee has festive season as one of the important things to make sure people's aspirations and dreams and their own plans are well fulfilled through the services that you provide in a very seamless fashion for them. Ankit, what have been your observations in terms of what the ecosystem trends look like outside of the categories that are already spoken about?
And there was obviously a lot of learnings from last year's, right? Like budgets went down, so there was an increased focus on optimizing whatever people had at hand. And even the last festive season was something people were still trying to figure out as to what lies ahead for them. One of the things that we have seen as a change in the mindset for a lot of the marketers is the focus on retention, right? So earlier we used to think of the growth cycle of acquiring users and then activating them and then engaging them and then going through that cycle until revenue. What we saw is that brands really focused on retention, and retention became the centerpiece of everything that the users' activities were happening across all the platforms. In terms of specific tactics, what we've seen is brands are now becoming obviously more conscious that while people still have more time to spend in the digital ecosystem, as compared to earlier years, their attention span is still low, right? So they need to make sure that they're building really coherent messaging and experiences across different platforms. So that was one. The other was brands are targeting really high intent users and making sure that those high intent users go through the activation cycle and then ultimately revenue, instead of just focusing on pure acquisition and app install numbers and losing out on low intent users. So these are a couple of things that we saw happening last year, and I think even for this year, as we go into the festive season, the focus is going to be on optimizing, each and every dollar spent and optimizing the user experience across all the platforms.
Yes, definitely, Ankit. As I'm sure the marketers on the panel will say, ROI has definitely been the highest metric for every marketing owner anyway. And I think the last 2 years have really taught us that it's all the more higher, right? Like when you are
Yep.
choosing to invest into marketing, when businesses and the society in general is going through a lot, you have to be very mindful of what you get out of it. Yeah. I think, the trend has been the same. We just spoke about how the last 2 years have been different. I think it's also true that digital has definitely benefited from the last 18 months, right? For what, we've all been craving for the time when digital and smartphone really become the first point of contact and the first choice for consumers. And we've just seen that change drastically, patterns change in the last 18 months, right? One of the things that again came out in our study was that there's roughly basis sample data, at least people plan to spend 42% higher than last year, this year in the festive season. So which means that there is definitely, there's a lot of revenge shopping, revenge travel that's being spoken about. And we are definitely going to see that, right? Last year was muted. Maybe this year, we're definitely going to see how that changes. Now, keeping that in mind, Advit, what do you think that people should really remember as a digital native brand when they're starting off on their acquisition journey and there is marketing spends that's really going to increase, not just now immediately this festive season, and we always have to sustain, right? So what are the few things that you will ask people to keep in mind as they start planning their acquisition activities? What metrics should they track? What should be a best practice that they have?
Sure. So first, I'll just quickly talk about revenge travel, right? I think that's already started. The last weekend, the long weekend that was there, right? The entire Bangalore was actually in Coorg. It was not over here, right? But yeah, coming back to your question, essentially, what really happens is that, when you're planning for acquisitions, you have to plan the entire end-to-end funnel, right? And the entire end-to-end funnel doesn't end at the first purchase or the second purchase or the fifth purchase, but it also includes referrals, loyalty, and advocacy. Right, so that entire piece has to be planned. Obviously, a brand which is doing it for the first time, they will not have the numbers, but some estimates can definitely be done. And they have to understand that if they're adding or putting so much amount of money in acquiring a particular user or acquiring a particular a sign up, app install, whatever you're doing, right? You have to make sure that how will you monetize it. How much time it will take. Right? That is also very important, right? I mean, what is the payback time? Is it 6 months? Is it 20 months? Is it 5 years? Right. So that entire journey has to be planned, right? If it's a new category, you have to give a lot of incentives to create habits. If it's an established industry, then obviously you have to come up with something new, something innovative, have something very different from all the other brands that are out there. Right? That really makes a lot of difference. Right? Even if it's a very crowded market, right? People will look for something which is unique in you, which is at every stage, right? I mean, you have to optimize your conversion rates at each and every stage, right? From the first ad impression till advocacy, right? So that is very important. It's all maths right now. Digital marketing has purely become maths. But then there's other side of it, which is the branding side, right? Branding also is very, very important. And branding is very important from a perspective of attracting a lot of alliances, attracting a lot of users, attracting a lot of partnerships, which will, and investors also, which will essentially happen only from branding, which may not happen purely from digital marketing. So there has to be a fine balance which has to be maintained between branding and digital marketing. And unfortunately, there's no formula to that what is the percentage that you have to allocate to branding and what is the percentage that you have to allocate to marketing, right? That does not really exist. It has to be a call. It has to be discussed. It has to be strategic in the manner that you have to focus on events. You have to focus on audiences where you really want yourself to be present, right? So for example, if you want to get investors, you do branding on platforms where investors are present, right? But if you want to get partnerships, you do branding on platforms where your potential partners will see you, Right. So that's from a branding perspective, but from a marketing perspective, I would say, measure each and everything and always keep the end-to-end funnel, in perspective.
Thanks, Advit. On what we should keep in mind from an acquisition perspective for digital native brands that are finally seeing the true limelight. I think you briefly touched upon it. Acquisition is just the start of a journey. Truly, retention is what digital native brands should be aiming for. Ishan, how do you as a category, given that it's also partly very intent and need driven, how is it that you manage retention at Kreditbee? What have been some of the best practices that you've observed?
Right. So, we were just talking about festive offers a while back, right? So, one key thing that we all advertisers should keep in mind, I believe, is the fact that you're not the only one, right? So, when you reach out to the consumer, you should realize that there are 10 other brands in the same proposition, which is reaching out or which are reaching out to the consumers with probably similar offers. Some of them might even have more aggressive offers when it comes to the overall monetary value of what's the benefit you're giving to the consumer. So how do you differentiate yourself? Just giving an offer does not make you break the clutter. So the idea is to add an element of personalization to that offer, where even that additional benefit, whether it's a monetary or a value benefit that you're giving to the consumer, is very, very personal, customized to the individual to whom you're reaching out, or let's say at a larger level to the cohort to which you're reaching out, right? So I believe retention definitely plays a very key role, because a lot of brands are trying to acquire new consumers, and some of them could belong to you as well. So you have to make sure that on one hand you try to acquire more consumers from outside, and secondly, the people who are already transacting on your platform should not feel the need to switch to another platform just because they got a more superior offer. Now, the benefit you have when you have a captive base is that you have a lot more data, a lot more information, a lot more transaction history about the consumer, which gives you an advantage to give a superior offer. And when I say superior offer, I don't just mean it from a monetary or from a very transaction value standpoint, but largely with respect to the personalization that you can attach to the offer. So let's say if I have been transacting on a particular category more often than let's say another category on an e-commerce portal, then giving me something that adding value in that category for me would probably make it a lot more personalized than just giving me a vanilla cashback on any purchase that I make from a certain card or on a certain category and so on and so forth. Because that offer or that benefit that the brand gave me has an element of Ishan in it, right? And that gives me that emotional connect with the brand. So, the long story short, I think retention is first of all very important, because you have to prevent your consumers from being acquired by someone else. And how to do it is to add that element of customization, personalization in your offer, so that it's not just a random offer that's being floated out to a large set of people, but it's an offer that is specifically meant for me. And if I believe that, then I'm definitely going to stick around with you for longer.
Definitely, Ishan. I think brands need to keep in mind that it's not just the monetary value, but the personalization and talking to every individual user that really helps them build a loyal user. Once you acquire a user, you learn a lot more about them. So it's important that you tweak your message to talk to them and not just talk to a large mass of individuals. And I think that definitely improves retention overall. Heading over to you, Ankit, you've seen this happen. You've seen the funnel of acquisition, retention, churn, installs, uninstalls happen across categories for many years now as a platform who's observing the
Yes.
ecosystem, right? So what do you think? Like, you've seen some of the best marketers do this. People have done this right. People have made mistakes. So what do you think are the lessons, best practices, experiments that you would recommend to any marketer who's starting off on their journey?
Yes, and I actually want to continue from where Advit was talking about, as to plan ahead for each and every stage of that funnel. What we have seen really successful marketers is they plan ahead for each of those stages, not only in terms of optimizing the conversion rates. Yes, there are different ways in which you can do that, but also making sure that all of the experience is also tied in. One of the key functions of, when we speak about retention, the opposite function is churn, right? All of us see a lot of user churn. And while some of it is inevitable, you can definitely arrest the percentage of churn at each and every stage. And that's where when we are working with brands, the concept of planning ahead for churn, because churn does not start when you go to the retention stage. It actually starts, as Advit was saying, right, like right at the first impression. So you can optimize for reducing churn right at starting from your acquisition phase all the way up to your revenue and advocacy. So one of the and churn can happen at a lot of stages, right? A couple of places wherein I've seen marketers really optimize for is at the activation stage, wherein the first time user experience, or when the user is coming into the platform, there is to lower the barriers for activation, right? So for example, if you're acquiring a user from X campaign, and that campaign speaks about a promise, when I land on the app, that is what the story, that's how the story should continue in the app itself, and it should not give me the plain vanilla activation. The other is also around lowering the bar is sometimes app developers tend to over optimize on collecting the data up front to personalize user experience down the funnel, right? But that creates a sort of a negative experience, right? Like you're asking me for my email addresses and phone numbers and then sending me OTPs to verify all of that. I think those flows can be super optimized. And when we have seen marketers who do this smartly in optimizing activation from different channels, making sure that the context is carried over from where you're acquiring the user into the activation funnel, the activation rates are high, but also the same cohort of users down the funnel see better retention rates as well. So that is where I would say app developers and marketers need to focus on. And now marketing as a function, especially if you see here, that it needs to work together with the growth team. Some companies now have a retention team as well. Speaking to a couple of companies that have 3 people dedicated in just optimizing the first time user experience, right? So all of these teams need to work together and attack each and every point of the funnel from going from one stage to the other, and see how they can optimize that.
Yeah, definitely, Ankit. I can identify with that. The lines are blurred between marketing, product, growth, monetization, teams just working together.
Yeah.
I think I really like one point that you stressed upon, to say that it's not just about activation. It's also, and it's not just about the best metrics, it's about the user experience as well. Make it as frictionless as possible for users. While you want to get data, while you want to make things personalized, if you're introducing friction in the step, you're likely losing the user, right? And that's something which I think today the India app ecosystem has learned it. We've seen many beautiful experiences getting through.
Yes.
People get to experience the product, enjoy it, and then they become advocates and they start providing more data to brands. I at least have experienced it as a user. Right? Now I think one of the important things as we talk about festive season, and I think it's remained a common theme in the last 2 years, is that you have a lot of things going on, right? Both as brands, as a country, as users. We have IPL as well colliding a lot with the festive season this year, which means that as marketers, this is really the time when everyone's trying to capture the eyeballs of a potential consumer, potential user, who you want to convert to be a fan of yours. So I think as a brand that's starting to plan their spend for festive season, or is already planning their spends, what would be your tips, Advit, to anyone who's actually trying to make sure that they stand apart from the clutter, right? Because if you're spending big money and you get lost and you're not remembered, you're definitely wasting that money. So what would be your advice to anyone who's planning to spend this year?
Sure. So there are essentially 2 ways, right? If you have to cut the clutter, if you have to stand out, one is the creative route. You have an extremely attractive creative, different creative, which makes you stand out. Some people become very quirky. Some people become very follow an emotional approach. Some people follow a feature-led approach, and so on and so forth. So that's a creative route where your messaging is very, very clear and very different, which has not been introduced in the market at least in the last 2-3 years. Right. The second is more on campaign-led. Now, essentially, what happens is that there are a lot of new campaign categories that are coming, that have come in the last few years. Right. I mean, for example, cashback is a campaign category which did not exist maybe 7-8 years back, right? So new campaign categories have to be introduced, and that is what a marketer should always look at. They should always look at, okay, what can I do with my limited product or tech or or any other limitations. What can I offer to the customer which is very new, which has a novelty factor, which has innovation, and at the same time does not cheat the customer, right? I mean, you cannot say, I'll give you up to XX and you don't give, and that only one person gets it, right? So that's not the idea. The idea is to come up with creative campaign categories. That is something, if the marketers spend a lot of time on, I would say, if they plan that activity out, that I'm going to launch 2 campaign categories this year, right? Some people say that, okay, there are hundreds of them. I mean, we've seen all those. We've seen buy one get one. We've seen percentage discounts. We've seen flat discounts. We've seen voucher redemptions. We've seen variable rewards, and so on and so forth. They're just growing, right? One brand introduces it, and all the other brands catch on to it. But if you have to be ahead of others, you have to introduce new campaign categories.
Yeah, I think innovation is definitely important, and thanks for touching upon that, Advit. Ishan, what else would be your tips beyond creatives and innovation that you would ask brands to keep in mind while they're launching their campaigns in this busy period of Festive and IPL, when everyone's trying to capture the attention of the user?
So, I mean, let me just put myself into the shoes of a consumer for the time being to answer this question. So, as a consumer, when I'm, let's say, viewing the IPL or, let's say during the festive season, when I scroll through my timeline, I see a plethora of offers and discounts. So much so that being an Indian consumer now, I almost have a sense of entitlement that, okay, if it's festivities going on, then I almost virtually or subconsciously demand an offer from a brand, right? That, okay, what's the offer that you're giving, because everyone else is giving me an offer. Now, how to break the clutter, how to make yourself more differentiated, is to add that element of personalization, which I was just talking about some time back. That at the end of the day, the offer has to hit me, and it has to be something that I remember. And not just the offer, let's just even talk about the ad copy or the way in which your communication is going out. So it cannot just be revolving around a materialistic benefit that you're giving me, because it's not going to stay with me for long. So instead, the way in which the communication is curated, the way in which the entire campaign is designed, the way in which I am reached out to, the way in which the value is eventually delivered to me. So the innovation has to happen across the value chain of marketing and product, rather than just rolling out maybe a coupon code here and there and just giving a little bit of a cashback on whatever transactions I'm doing. So that's what I believe would really make your offer stand out, or make your campaign stand out, the festive campaign, and that eventually will lead or that eventually would yield better business results, because otherwise you're just one among the rest.
Thank you, Ishan. Innovation clearly continues to be a theme amongst both marketers. And I think it's definitely true that you have to strive to be different, and you have to make sure that, be it creatives or messaging, however it is that you speak to a consumer, it has to be different. Ankit, anything else that you would like to add as tips to brands who are continuing on this journey?
The biggest thing that I would say, my biggest advice there would be focus on retention, right from the early stages of building the experience for the user. A lot of times, yes, you will get the rush, you will get the the traffic coming onto your product, whether it's an app or a website, but you need to figure out how you can go and retain those users, especially after this festive season is over. The other important thing is focusing on churn users as well, right? If a lot of times companies do not want to go after churn users because they're out of the funnel, and they can, probably their mechanics of acquiring users are so well set that they feel that it's easier to go and acquire new users, top of the funnel. But actually, if you look at it, it's far more easier to resurrect and reactivate your churned users because they probably went off your platform for a small thing, maybe a small snag in the product, or maybe the messaging or something like that. So it's far more easier to reactivate your churn users. And the other thing is your churn users are going to your competitor, right? And you don't want to do that. So like, for example, in case of Coindcx, if your user has churned, that probably the user wanted to trade in crypto. They're not doing it on my platform. They're probably doing it at someone else's platform. So two main themes, Naveen, for me: focus on retention, right at the top of the funnel. Look after the cohorts of your churn users and see how you can win them back.
Awesome. Yes, I think definitely right. Looking at the right cohorts across the funnel, and even the kind of insights you can learn from churned users, and if you're not able to get them back, if you're even just able to reach out to them to understand why they churn, I think that'll definitely be a great input that goes into all subsequent marketing campaigns. Right. I think as we look to wrap up, just like maybe from everyone on the panel, a few things that you picked up or ended up discovering in the last 18 months in the journey of what we've all been going through as the pandemic, and we've been living through this as marketers, as professionals. What are the few things that you picked up in this journey that you think will become a consistent part of your regular activity, be it in marketing or just as you start thinking of getting back to some semblance of normalcy soon? Advit?
Sure. And so the biggest thing that I have seen, the biggest new trend that has come in the post-pandemic is learning and education. Right? A lot of brands are focusing huge amounts, huge investments to educate the user, to make them understand what their category is all about, how they can not just transact, but build that relationship by education. That will continue, that will stay. It may not happen for already established categories, but at least for every new category that's coming or every category that is not yet established, right? Learning is something that every brand should focus on. They should definitely make sure that the user is educated, and of course at every stage, not just at the acquisition stage.
Yes, I think this is definitely something that I've seen as a user, right? Brands are focusing more and more on building communities, right? That is by teaching them new things. Many of us, me included, have been first-time crypto investors in the last 18 months. So we're all still trying to learn things, and crypto is one of the categories. I'm sure there are many more across short-form video, across just investing, fintech, lending, all of this that we're seeing that we'll have to learn more about. And brands are definitely, it's paying off as well if you invest into teaching people and making them a community around you.
Right. So we kept it very simple, Naveen. So for us, during the pandemic, there was a moratorium that was announced by the RBI, and that led to a lot of instability and commotion across the lenders, the consumers, the regulator, because everyone had their own opinion on how to deal with the overall situation. Now, during that, the first and foremost thing that a brand in that entity or in that industry needs to ensure is to educate the consumers in the right manner. Because a lot of our consumers, and not just our consumers, in general, a lot of people felt that this is sort of a loan holiday forever, right? I mean, if you don't, if you're not supposed to pay the EMIs and your credit score doesn't get impacted, then it basically means that you don't have to pay back and there are no repercussions. So it's not important for us to now go and tell them that you have to pay the loan now, because we have to be sensitive towards the consumers as well. But at the same time, it's important that we educate the consumers that, okay, if you don't repay your loans or EMIs on time, then even though you are not supposed to pay the penalty or the late payment fees, but you're still, the interest is accruing and it's compounding month on month. So if you really can pay whatever you can pay, please go ahead and pay us, and the remainder, we'll help you pay whenever you can, right? So the first and foremost thing is to educate consumers about the product, the proposition, the industry, and whatever's going on. Because honestly, I feel that is an aspect that most of the marketers are missing out on. The second thing is innovating in your overall offering. So let's say again, during the pandemic, we realized that people won't be able to pay the complete loan amounts in the way or in the schedule that we had given them during the disbursement of the loan. So the idea was to now help them with flexible payment plans, so that it's it's helping them also repay a loan that they want to pay genuinely but are finding it difficult. And at the same time, we also get the loan amount back over a period of time, and our books also look better than they were. Right. So the idea is to think of innovative solutions, think of those kind of product tweaks which would not just suit the consumer in let's say in our case in repaying the loans that they want to without impacting them, but at the same time for us also if we give those options to the consumers, they feel we are on their side, and they also kind of then reciprocate by doing the right thing for themselves and for us, right? So that's the other part. The overall consumer experience, again, I mean, it's been spoken of all the time, but I think it's not as cliched as it sounds. It's something we really have to focus on. We have to understand the consumer better. We have to identify what are the key levers via which you can enhance the consumer experience. I mean, you can do 100 things, but at the end of the day, there are these 5 or 10 things that will probably give the consumer that experience that you want to give them. So for you to identify that, you have to constantly talk to consumers, you have to look at the data, you have to see that what's working, what are the various points where the consumers are giving you those signals that they really are valuing the benefit that you're giving them at that particular stage, and then you have to work around it, right? So it's a both left and right brain approach, but at the end of the day, I think giving a good consumer experience, educating the consumers, innovating your proposition, all this would not just ensure a good acquisition, but largely a good retention, because at the end of the day, your profitability or lifetime value comes from retention more than just acquiring customers and letting them go. So when you value your customers, the ones who are already your captive base, I think that captive base will keep growing. So I think that's what I would I would want to say over here.
Awesome. Definitely been a very insightful 18 months for everyone, and I think you've captured a lot of those insights in a very interesting fashion here for everyone's benefit. Ankit, what about you?
I'll touch upon 2 things actually, right? Like one that I've seen brands do as we went through the pandemic is just having a lot of empathy for your end users and what they're going through. I've seen brands communicate in a fashion and even building some of tools and services which were not a core part of their offering, right? But it's just sort of gelled well with what the consumer was going through in their lives, wherein that communication was so seamless, and some of those additional services really helped users through that period. So communication has evolved and it has become very user centric. That was one. I'll give you an example also, like in the travel space, a lot of the travel aggregators, they started, service around, what are the COVID related norms in traveling, and, just a lot of information. So even though you're not going and transacting with, which is was their breadwinner for these aggregators of booking hotels and flights, but still the users could go find a utility in, what are the, norms right now. And obviously they kept on changing every month, right, from state to state. So one was communication. The other was also around the constraints that COVID brought in. I saw amazing use cases being built, out of that. And some of those use cases you've seen on apps, and those use cases would then carry on to, even in the email that I would get, or maybe if I interact with that brand offline, the use of QR codes, in all these offline, dining places, and it connects so seamlessly, into your WhatsApp and then into your app. I think those cross-platform experiences have been amazing. So these are the 2 trends that I've seen. Probably the pandemic acted as a forcing function for it, but I think these are these consciousness around empathetic communication as well as cross-platform experience is going to stay with us.
Yeah, definitely. I think as marketers, we all need to be mindful of what's going on around with our users' lives as well, right? I think that's something which we've seen. It doesn't matter what campaign you're chasing if you cannot connect with the user and you stand out as someone who doesn't even recognize the difficulties that they're going through in their own lives, right? Yeah, I think it's been a fascinating panel, a lot of insights. I definitely enjoyed hearing many of the things that all of you summarized. I hope everyone enjoyed this as well. And you can reach out to all of us through our respective LinkedIn if you have any questions. But I think in the last 30 to 40 minutes, we've all heard how it's really important if you're a brand and if you're someone who's digitally native and trying to grow this festive season. Remember a few things. It's not just about acquisition and spending big money and being in front of the user. You have to balance it out with the right metrics that come through to you. Measure every step of the journey from the first impression that you show to the user to when they join your app, register themselves, and if they churn, that too. If they're retaining, what are they transacting on? What are the activities they do? When you're planning campaigns, start ahead. Make sure that you're setting up the right metrics that you're measuring for. Also, most importantly, the balance that most brands have been struggling to strike: performance and brand. There's no easy answer to this. Each brand has a different problem that they're trying to solve. If you're in an established category, it's very different. If you're in a new category, you have to do something different. And I think most importantly, always be empathetic. Always understand and be in the shoes of a consumer when you're speaking to them. Uh, do not do not forget that they are still a user, that they are still human, and they are going through their own journey. And your marketing campaign should not shock them into something that they definitely don't want to think about the brand at all in the future, right? So I think we'll all learn, and I'm sure we will hear from you as well. Do feel free to talk to us if you need anything. All of us are available. And I hope this was useful for you. Look forward to getting in touch with many more of you after this. Thanks, Ankit. Thanks, Advit. Thanks, Ishan, for joining us.